I spent about 30 years in the building trades. It's my first adventure into politics as a candidate, but I've done a lot of volunteering for campaigns in the past. My wife and I have been here about 3 years, and I'm basically retired, unless I get elected, and then I won't be retired any longer. It's supposed to be a part-time job, but we'll see what happens. But my motivation for running is I just found out that the Boise city government doesn't listen to the people very well, and I found it out through people I met around the Capitol during the legislative session. After that was done, I met people that were involved in the city government, and they told me stories about city council meetings and the mayor and the city council not really wanting to listen to people that objected to their programs and policies, and that kind of got my attention. I'm very much a constitutional conservative guy. I believe in representative government for everybody, not just for the people that vote for the folks that are in power. And I really did find out that pretty much half the population in Boise doesn't have much of a voice in the future of the city. So the more I thought about that, when the redistricting happened and the city was divided up into the 6 different districts where the city council people will have to reside, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and see what would happen. And here I am.
What do you see as the top issues in Boise right now?
Ooh, boy, it's funny. When I first started this, growth is obviously having a huge impact on the city. And I'm a little bit of a historian and a research guy. So I started looking at the city history and the building up of the city, looking at what's happening now. And there's a serious impact on the citizens right now with all the building. And what I learned was a lot of the building is in preparation for people that are coming here, which makes sense. The city's got to grow. People have to have a place to live. But there's not a lot of care being given to what the impact on the citizens are that live here now. And that bothered me a bit, especially after being in the building trade for so long and seeing so many communities built up that I took a part in. I thought it was important that somebody in the city council, somebody in city government would give those folks a voice and let them talk about the impact in the city and what's going on with that. So that was sort of the genesis of it. And the more research I did, the more things I found interest in. There's affordable housing affordability, which really are 2 different discussions. And obviously we have a growing homeless problem. Recently, unfortunately, we seem to have a little bit of a crime problem with the growing population. That's troubling to me. It really is. I think it's a symptom of a growing city with a lot of new people in it. And I want to make sure that the folks that live here, that they feel safe. Public safety is another big issue for me. I defend the police. I'm not a big fan of defunding any police or public safety departments. I want the folks that live here to be able to go out of their house at night, go downtown, and feel safe. And we have a great police department here. They do a terrific job. And I want them to be recognized and appreciated and funded and supported in a way that they know that the city government and the people who live here really do value them and really do appreciate them. And there's a growing list of things that I'm getting more interested in. The sewer bond issue, development out around in the valley, the impact it's having on the people that live here, especially with traffic. I spent a lot of time at the Capitol during the legislative session, and I watched a lot of legislation go through. And one of the things that I followed was that HB 413 that divided up the larger cities for districts. I'm a big supporter of that. I just really want the people that live here to know that they have a representative that lives close to them, that they can contact and that they can share things with, they can have a conversation with if they need to, and give them the opportunity to have a voice downtown. So, those are kind of the major topics for me. The homelessness problem here, I really don't know what to do about that. The chronic homeless people, it's really hard to help them. But we have a lot of new homeless here that lost their jobs during COVID because the businesses that they worked for closed. and they weren't able to get their jobs back, and they ran out of money, and they couldn't pay their rent, and they ended up out on the street. I think those folks we could help right away, get them back into a functional part of the mainstream, and give them that pride of self-sufficiency back, and get them back into a lifestyle, or just a quality of life that at least they had when they started, and to help them get a little farther along. And then that's kind of the new homeless at the top, the chronic homeless at the bottom. There's a big range of people in between, and there's a lot of new homeless faces in town in the last 2 or 3 years that I've noticed. And there's a lot more panhandlers on the street, people just wandering around. There's a big problem around some of the neighborhoods with homeless people sleeping in the parks. And that has the neighborhood people really worried, because this is where they bring their children and walk their dogs. And when you come over here to walk your dog in the morning, and there's somebody sleeping in the children area in the sand pit that's been there all night, you probably don't want to take your kids over there. So that's the kind of impact that growth is having on the city that a lot of the citizens are worried about, that and a lot of other things.
And talking about people who are chronically homeless,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things the city has tried to help with that issue is New Path. What do you think about that program?
I'm 66 years old. I come from California, and I've been kind of watching the evolution of helping the homeless for, 40 years maybe. And it's difficult. I know we're always trying new things to help those folks out. I think a big part of that equation is those people, they want to be helped. They want to better their lives. And in some cases, maybe they just don't want to, or they're not able to, or they can't wrap their head around it. And the only way to really help them significantly is to remove them off the street, put them in a facility where they can be supervised and managed and given health care, and improve their hygiene, and at least get their physical being better. But you got to violate their civil rights to do that, and nobody wants to, and I don't want to either. To say it's okay for someone to sleep in the park because they don't want to be inside of a building at night, I don't know how to fix that problem. I really don't. But there's people who don't want to sleep in the park, who would like to have a better life. But the chronic homeless people, seems like every few years there's another program that comes along with some new idea. I think there's been some success. I think homeless veterans are a great opportunity to help people, because they've already been functional, and they've already been productive, and they've already made a huge contribution to society and to our country. And a lot of them want to get back to having a more normal life, and some counseling, some medical care, some job training and job assistance, maybe help with just a place to live for a while, can do a lot for them. Though there's a lot of people we can help right away. There's a lot of people we can help kind of in the longer term, and there's a lot of people I'm afraid we just maybe not be able to help at all. We just have to do our best to take care of them. It's not, I don't think it's compassionate or humane to just let people sleep out in the open and not do anything to help them out. But it's difficult to help them if you can't approach them, if you can't make contact with them. And that's a difficult process. It really, really is. But there's a lot of really big-hearted people that are really generous, that are trying to make that kind of stuff happen. And I support those things, I really do. It'd be nice to have, some of the low barrier shelters that we've had around town, where people can go when the weather's bad, or it's too hot, or it's too cold, or they need a meal, or they need a bathe, or something. I think those kind of facilities are pretty necessary. And it's do what we can for them. That's the hard part, is doing what we can for them and get them down the road where they're having a little better quality of life. And if we can accomplish that, I think it's good.
One of the issues you mentioned when we were talking about kind of the top issues in Boise right now is public safety. What would you do specifically to address public safety?
Right now, I think our public safety situation in Boise is pretty good. Our police department's really, it's top notch. People really like our police department. I have not heard one bad thing about law enforcement in the town. And I'd like to see the city's growing. Coverage for law enforcement has to grow along with that. The city needs to address that. It's a public service issue. And I'd like to see the funding stay in place for hiring quality people for the police department, give them the best training and the best equipment they need. help them be prepared to be as professional as they can out on the street to help people. And you know, sometimes you can prevent crime, all you can do is respond to it, like we've seen in the last few days. And I think in all those instances in the last 2-3 days, I think they've done a super job of covering as best they could, keeping innocent people safe and doing their job. And I think it's a great example of the quality that we have with our police department, and then you do a good job. Firefighters, I actually have had a couple meetings with the firefighters union here in Boise, and they're pretty confident that coverage in the city is good. And we also lend a lot of coverage out to like Garden City. We provide coverage for them. We also work with BLM and some of the surrounding fire districts. It's difficult, you know, crossing city boundaries and crossing county boundaries with fire protection, but they all work together really well. So I think that's in good shape. And first responders, our sheriff's department, they do a lot of water rescue at the river. They do a fine job of that. And Ada County ambulance and EMT services, they do a great job too. It's just got to grow along with the population. It's got to be funded properly, and it's just got to be a priority so that people know that those services are there for them when they need them.
And what would you do if you're elected to address the housing crisis?
Oof, that's a tough one. I think, you know, there's a big focus on affordable housing in the city right now, and in my research that I've done, and a lot of reading and articles and the things that I've seen on the city website, there's a lot of focus on what they refer to as higher density, taxpayer subsidized, sometimes rent controlled properties where people who really can't afford to pay the rent themselves have a place to stay. I don't have a problem with helping people out that have, you know, fallen through the cracks and the quality of the life has diminished because of that. But what I don't want to do is create a welcoming atmosphere for people that otherwise can't afford to live here unless they're on public assistance. And I don't think that does the city or these people any good, or those people any good, because they become dependent on the taxpayers to pay their bills and take care of them. And I don't mind helping people out over the, you know, for the short term or even the longer term, but I want to help those people get back to being self-sufficient. So if we have affordable housing, it should be a transitional process that they go through. Come into affordable housing, get your life back together, get some job training, get the help from outside government services, and kind of get yourself picked back up and get your pride and your self-esteem back in place and get back out and work and take care of yourself. I think anything that the taxpayers are funding should have that kind of a goal. If a developer wants to come into town and build something that is affordable or rent controlled, and the city wants to allow that to happen, and it's a private operation, it's a private property owner, you know, you kind of have to let them give that a try if that'll help. The people that have the money to move here, they don't really need taxpayer assistance for home affordability or a place to live. The other aspect of that is affordability versus affordable housing. Affordability is what you have in your pockets. And I think the city can do a lot to support local business by reducing the cost of opening your doors every day and turning on the lights, as far as, you know, fees and regulatory costs, and support businesses so they can hire more people, pay them a better wage, let them have more money to spend on improving their quality of life. There's probably only so much that the city can do, but one thing they can do is they cannot get in the way of that process where businesses move here, they employ people, they pay them a good wage, and so the folks can afford to take care of themselves. If the city can do things to encourage that formula, I'm all for it. But just building a bunch of high density, low income housing for people to live in, it's not really a solution unless it's a transitional thing.
So what would you say is maybe a solution for people who have jobs? They used to be able to afford living in Boise, but rent has just gone up so much that they're being priced out of the housing in Boise now.
That's a tough one because that's a marketplace problem. And you know, the places that people live in that pay rent to, That's private property. It's owned by maybe a corporation or a business. There's a whole neighborhood of apartments over here. I wouldn't call them high density housing, but it's definitely multi-unit housing. And I don't want government to step in and rent control that and take the value opportunity away from the landowner, for the property owner. I'm just not in favor of that. But it's difficult when people come here and the population grows, and typically when that happens, the price of things goes up too. And I've known some people who had to leave because they couldn't afford to buy a home here. They were renting, they had a couple kids, they wanted to have a home, and they just couldn't afford to buy, and they actually left the state and went to like Michigan or someplace. That does happen. People have the ability to move around if they want to. I hate to see people. I was talking to a woman the other day. She said, I'm worried about my children when they get out of college, that they won't be able to come back here and afford to buy a home and live in Idaho where they grew up. I don't know how to solve that problem, because it's really a marketplace. It's an economy problem. It's a private property discussion, and I'm not going to step in and tell someone who owns an apartment building or a home they're renting that this is the maximum amount of money that they can rent it or lease it for. I just don't think that's the job of government.
And recently there's been some discussion about kind of the balance between adding more housing and maintaining open space.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
One of the great things about this town is the amount of park space and open space we have. I mean, you can look over here and see the hillsides with the trail systems on it. That's one of the things that makes Boise really special, is the fact that you have access to open space. We have the green belt by the river right here. And what concerns me is that currently the city government is looking at city-owned properties like parks and other properties they own as opportunities to build higher density housing to accommodate the population growth. Just a block from here is the Lorimore Cunningham Memorial Arboretum. It's about a 3.5 acre parcel. The city owns it. They grow trees there to work on their city projects. And that property was included in a feasibility study for developing city-owned lands for high-density housing. And they were looking at that piece of property for up to 250 units. And I have no idea how they would stuff that much development onto a smaller piece of property without just completely ruining a neighborhood like this. So the conversation about developing property the city owns around neighborhoods and around the city, that discussion has to include the people that actually live there in the neighborhood associations and the people, the invitation to come and talk to the city and the planning and zoning department. That invitation has to be extended to the people who live in these areas of town where they're planning to build these things, because that's an area. It's an area of impact, whether it's property that's been brought into the city limits by annexation, or if it's still outside the city limits, it's still people live there. And if the city just chooses to build something and they don't interact with the people that live there, I got a problem with that part. That's that communication and transparency and accountability that really kind of got my radar when I first started looking at this. I think the folks that live in these neighborhoods around these parks and any places, they deserve to be heard when the city wants to plan a project. Just because you have a piece of open land doesn't mean you have to build on it. I have a saying, is that just because you can doesn't mean you should. So maybe you rethink how much housing you want to build, how fast you want to grow the population. Do you want to force the population to grow, or do you want to let it happen a little more organically and let the citizens that live here have some say-so about how it happens? But I don't want to see parks, especially parks and open spaces that people use for recreation. I don't want to see those being taken away, because that's a big part of what makes Boise, Boise.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything I didn't ask about?
I don't know. Like I said, my list is growing. No, I just, As a candidate, I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of people. I call them my potential constituents. I've been walking the neighborhoods and the precincts for a month, almost 2 months now, banging on doors, knocking on doors and talking to people, handing out my literature, and asking them how they think things are going. Some people say, they're not too concerned about it. Other people are not happy. And a lot of that is the fact that the city they're just doing a lot of things without public input, without talking to the citizens about the plans they have for the long-term future of Boise. And the people that have lived here for a few months and the people who lived here for their whole lives, they have things to say about that. And I think they deserve to be heard. So as a city council person, that's a priority for me, is listening to the citizens, because things are going to keep coming up. Programs are going to come up, decisions are going to need to be made, growth is going to continue to happen, and it has to be done in the right kind of way, with respect for the citizens, respect for the taxpayers, and respect for the businesses and the developers who want to come here and work and build and make money too. So I think we can accommodate everybody if we just have a good conversation about it all. So that's the direction I'm headed as far as the city council